Hello everyone. It's 2 minutes after the hour. We're going to go ahead and get started. Once again, thanks for joining us today for PowerPlan's webinar, 10 Steps to Choosing the Best Budgeting Software. One of the things that I want to go into right away real quickly is our housekeeping. I'm going to leave this on the screen for just a few minutes. If anyone is having trouble hearing our presentation, then you can't hear what I'm saying, but hopefully you can read this slide and see that you can dial in using your phone, and you'll still be able to see on your computer. And the access code is right there as well. You'll need those two things to be able to dial in. Also want to let you guys know that you are all muted. But as questions come to mind for you, please don't hesitate, just chat us. And I'll keep track of all the comments. And this presentation will probably take about 45 minutes, maybe a little less, and then we'll leave time for questions. And so anything that you send to us via chat, we will cover. Anything, if we run out of time, we'll respond to you individually via email. Also want to let you know that this webinar is being recorded, so you will be getting this recording sent to you tomorrow once we have it all uploaded, and you'll have it for your own records or to pass along to a colleague who might have missed out on it but would appreciate the information. At this point, I'm going to go ahead and pass the presenter skills over to Tina Hernandez, who is your presenter today, and she's going to go ahead and take you through all of it. So, Tina, I'm going to go ahead and make you the presenter.
Okay.
Perfect.
Okay, everybody should see the screen now. Okay, so what we will do is, let me just take a moment here and go over the agenda and what I anticipate covering in today's webinar. I will give you a brief introduction and identify us, PowerPlan, who we are, and then we will get into the 10 steps to choosing the best solution for you. Our hope and expectation is that after today you'll be able to take away some useful information, some food for thought in your quest for finding the right budgeting solution for you. And at the tail end of this presentation or webinar, we'll go ahead and present to you PowerPlan's special offer, and we appreciate your attendance, and so we hope that you find this webinar a useful valuable and useful of your time. With that, let me just introduce PowerPlan. My name's Tina Hernandez. PowerPlan, we have been in business since 1998, so we've been around for the past 18 years. We are based in Huntington Beach, Southern California, but we also have support centers throughout various states. We have Arizona, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania. Our objective there was to ensure that we have client support services and coverage available to cover the various time zones across the U.S. While we do serve customers that span all different types of industries, our primary sectors that we serve today are nonprofit organizations and the public sector. And what we really do at PowerPlan is we keep our focus on just building a best-of-breed budgeting and forecasting software. That is what we do. We don't kind of extend that offering into other areas. We keep our offering narrow, but that allows us to go deep with the functionality that the solution includes. Okay, our product, what we're able to do is interface with your other relevant data systems. So that includes your financial accounting software, your HR or payroll application. If you're pulling stats or other data sources that you would like to pull data and interface with PowerPlan, we have the tools and capabilities to support those interfaces. And our objective is always just to work with our customers, work with you to really develop an efficient budgeting process and ensure that as a result you get accurate data. Just a little bit about myself. Again, I did mention earlier, my name is Tina Hernandez. I'm the Director of Client Services here at PowerPlan. I am one of the original employees, so I joined the company when it was formed back in 1998. My roles over the years have really spanned everything from customer support, implementer, to product QA and project manager. Today I really oversee our teams that are responsible for all the areas such as the pre-sales areas, the project implementations and customer training, the post-implementation services and consulting. I oversee the individuals that handle all of those areas. I still, today, I love to get out in the field and work with the customers, so I still engage in the role as project manager. I take on several of those types of projects, specifically in the public sector. I have a colleague who holds that role more on the nonprofit side, and again, my focus is more on the public sector. Okay, at this time, a couple points I just want to mention here before we really kind of start down the path of what to look for is that we know obviously that to implement a new system, is going to involve significant change, and that whole process can feel overwhelming. So, and particularly as you start to look and analyze different product offerings and you start to talk with different vendors and you see multiple demos, at some point you may even feel like the product functionality just becomes a blur in what different vendors have presented to you. One thing that's important is that you're going to be presented as you go through the process. You're going to be presented with a great deal of functionality that you find that you need or that you can certainly use, but it's also important to be aware that you could potentially be flooded with items that aren't as significant of a need. Okay, so having said that, it is critical that before you start your process that you do your homework and you're able to ask vendors the right questions that's going to ultimately allow you to derive at deciding which product, which solution, and which vendor is right for your organization. And our objective with this webinar is really just to share some useful tips and leave you, as I mentioned, with some food for thought as you move towards finding a better budgeting and forecasting solution. The first key question that you must ask yourself and really spend the amount of time required to address this question is, what do you want your budgeting to look like? And this is important because this is an opportunity for you. Many times you find yourselves kind of budget cycle after budget cycle going through the same repetitive steps, the same processes, maybe getting very frustrated when you're finished. But once you decide that you're ready for a change and that you need significant improvements, this is an opportunity to really go in and examine what you're currently doing, your internal processes. And you don't want to work really hard to recreate what you have, but it's more important to take this opportunity and to improve and to re-engineer some of your maybe more inefficient processes and base some of those changes on best practices. This is your opportunity to work with a partner and to kind of learn what other comparable organizations are doing, what's best practice, what's recommended, and be flexible to change. This is the time to make those changes. When you want to find out currently, when you assess yourself and your internal processes, what functions or what aspects of your processes are currently, they feel like they're just wasting a lot of time. What are your pain points, and really what do you want to resolve with implementing a new solution? The third point, they're asking decision makers what they would like to see. Really, this is your opportunity to look at this engagement from a broad perspective and involve the various levels of users within your organization. So it's kind of, what is your goal of this project, and how will success be measured? And really, in order for you to determine that, it's important to have feedback and buy-in from the various types of users and the various user roles. So this is your opportunity to make that happen. And we see that with a solution, the right solution, that you have the potential really to significantly improve what you're doing and save time, add value with selection of the right tools and use of the right tools. You have to truly analyze and understand where your weak spots are. So most of the time, not all of the time, but most of the time, somebody looking at a new solution, a new budgeting solution, is currently relying on spreadsheets, many of them. Oftentimes we see in the hundreds, and there's issues obviously with the need for redundant data entry, errors, linkage breaks. So if that is a heavy weak spot, I mean, if that's something that you're looking to resolve, how many of your processes are currently manual or still paper-based that you now have, you're seeking for tools to integrate and to really streamline the processes, and to have one central tool where you're not having some data in one location, some in another, some written on paper, but really a centralized database with all the information and transparency available at the appropriate levels. Many times when we're discussing with prospective clients, we hear that there's version control issues. How do we secure versions? How can the system, how can you as a vendor help us with this type of issue, to be able to generate changes to our budget and to be able to make sure that at certain points in time those versions are locked and users can't change them, or that we limit who has access to continue making changes to certain versions. So those are things that you should be thinking about. There are a few other areas here that have been identified, but again, this is kind of at a not such a granular level, but really what are kind of at a high level, what are those pain points and weak spots that you're dealing with at this time. So a few of the items that we've identified, for instance, is we know that the position or payroll obviously constitutes the largest portion of any organization's budget. Is that an area that you need significant improved efficiencies and capabilities in that area? Is there a need to perform what-if analysis and to be able to run different scenarios based on different conditions, and to be able to get those results reasonably fast and be assured that you have accurate data? Workflow tends to be another troublesome area for people, that maybe the workflow with the Excel spreadsheets is not widely available to kind of track at what stages of budget's in. Again, to mention who has the ability to view those data, and if there's multi-tiered approval processes. So, and then we commonly hear that people are frustrated with the limitations they currently have with data querying tools or reporting capabilities. So again, if those are issues, some of those that we've mentioned to you, you want to have those types of items in mind when you're looking at solutions and when you're talking with vendors, to be able to address those areas. Now, being able to distinguish a need to have versus a nice to have, this is critical and fundamental. And I will give you a very real situation here in a moment. But your question really should be, what is it that's going to justify your investment and make this entire change in this journey worthwhile for you? And when you ask yourself that question, you always want to keep in mind kind of the analogy that we need to crawl before we walk, and then we walk before we run. And if you use that analogy while you're determining your needs versus your nice to haves, that'll take you far. What I recently encountered, I was part of an RFP team that we just wrapped up that RFP, and for those of you who are in the public sector on this call or that have requirements to issue a request for proposal or a request for quote, this RFP consisted of nearly 500 functional and technical questions. It was, to be honest, completely unreasonable for anybody really responding. I mean, vendors want the opportunity, and if time permits and if resources are available, they will respond to something like that. But there's a risk of getting that type of detailed into what you're looking for and understanding that out of those 500 items, what really is significant to you, what are your must-haves, and which of those items truly are just, they would be nice to have, but somebody has to take the time on the customer side to actually go through all those responses and decipher, did they truly get the level of detail and the information they need on their key areas of importance because of the sheer volume that was issued. So when you're thinking of your need to haves or nice to haves, I mean, think about your biggest decision makers. What's going to impact your decision? Is it functionality? And if so, again, the functionality even, that's broad in scope. What specific functionality must you have? What would you like to have? And maybe what are you curious about? Okay, is it cost? Is cost a big factor in your decision? Scalability. So for instance, maybe you initially plan to start small, a system that's contained within the budget office, but then you start seeing the power of the system and you want to roll the system out, go deeper in the organization. How scalable is the solution that you select? Those are things that you want to know up front. Deployment options are always something to consider. It is what is best for you. There's not necessarily a right or a wrong, but you want to know what options a vendor offers. So is an on-premise or a vendor-hosted solution most appropriate for your organization and in line with your technology direction? Okay, the project timeline, that's typically something that's crucial, and we all know that there are deadlines and certain limitations with how much time we have for a project. So it's important to understand whatever vendor you go with, what type of project timeline are you dealing with? And of course, vendor experience. You always want to make sure that any vendor that you go with has proven successes and can demonstrate their experience with comparable type of project engagements. Okay, I mentioned earlier about really making kind of the needs assessment, your internal needs assessment, a collaborative effort, or seeking that input from various user types throughout the organization. That's going to assure you the best ultimate outcome and user buy-in for your newly selected solution. Okay, we talked about knowing the difference between those essentials and your wish list. Very key in developing your need to have versus your nice to haves. Okay, and when you also distinguish those essentials from your wish list, it's important even to prioritize your functionality so that when you're discussing solutions and capabilities that you can really emphasize and spend the appropriate amount of time you need to feel assured that your key areas, your key requirements are going to be satisfied. So it's recommended that you prioritize your functionality needs, kind of rank them, and be prepared to put your vendor pool to the test on ensuring that they can meet your requirements, your key requirements. Okay, and the other thing, and this kind of goes back to the RFP that I mentioned and that we recently wrapped up, but you certainly want to consider any future needs of your organization. You always want to do that. But I think it is very key to be pragmatic in defining what your immediate must-haves are. And again, in my experience, I've seen everything in the public sector. There's almost inevitably always an RFP that gets issued. And in that case, you know, I've seen everything from, let's say, 20 key questions to this one that we just wrapped up that had 500 functional and technical. So again, there's not a right or a wrong, but I would say that kind of stick to what you must have, and then separate in your quest, separate what those nice to haves are, or kind of future needs. And it's good to know the direction of the organization and what's on the product roadmap, and will the product meet your evolving needs. But again, be pragmatic about what you must have right from the onset. Okay, this next slide, what solution functionality will add value? That's a question that you want to ask yourself. So obviously, as you start seeing demos, you're going to see that there are a lot of exciting innovations available out in our space. Okay, but what you want to ask yourself is, which of those features and functionality will truly add value in your operation? And you want to consider certain fundamental capabilities that and any solution that you select at minimum must have sophisticated functionality in certain areas. And some of those areas that I've identified here is more, again, just kind of thought-provoking, but a multi-user system that includes good collaboration tools. So when you're involving many users in the process, that the system that you select gives those users the ability to really, when they're developing their budgets, that they're able to build details into those budgets right within the system, that they're able to add narrative at a detailed account line, that if they need to attach files and external files as supporting documents or justification, that the solution allows them to do that. Your objective should be a one-stop shop that has, again, that eliminates the need for files and detailed backup to be stored separately. And we all know that depending on your organization's requirements, that you may use one organization may use a different budget methodology than another. It's important to know that the vendor you select, that they're flexible and that they do offer different methodologies. In other words, when I suggest different budget methodologies, you have, for instance, the traditional incremental-based budget. You have some organizations that do a zero-based budget or a priority-based budget. There are others that are more, find a driver-based type budget more useful, where, for instance, that users are able to plan factors such as student counts and occupancy rates, and those type of parameters then drive the corresponding revenue lines. So you just want to make sure that whatever vendor you select, they have experience in the most appropriate budget methodology that works for you, and that the solution is flexible enough to accommodate different methodologies, because I have seen where an organization has traditionally budgeted in one manner and later decides that they're going to change their budget methodology. Again, as I mentioned, kind of the more common, just a incremental based, where you're able to do something like take the prior year's actuals or the most recent adopted budget and use that as the starting point. You may be applying certain inflationary or deflationary factors to that, but those are the types of functionality that you need to question yourself on. What do you need, and does the solution offer that? Security is always an important factor to consider, particularly with solutions now that have detailed position or employee level information in the system to allow you to really generate in-depth payroll and personnel budgets down at that detailed position level, but also give you the ability to establish the appropriate securities to that data. Okay, if capital expenditure or you have capital project budgeting, if those are an important requirement, important need in your business, so then you'll want to ask your vendor and then put them to the test and have them demonstrate their capabilities in those areas. Now, everybody that's seeking a budgeting tool will certainly be interested in what types of reporting and data analysis capabilities that the system has to offer. You should be looking really for flexible reporting, user-defined reporting capabilities, data analysis, really the ability to slice and dice data in different manners, to be able to pivot data and look at it from different perspectives, to be able to run multi-year plans and what-if forecasts, year-end projections, all of those kind of areas. If that's something that your organization does or that maybe has a need, maybe there's a high interest in those areas, but with the current methods and the current tools that you have, you find those very challenging, then the solution that you're moving towards should give you the abilities to strive in those areas. We mentioned workflow and audit trail. That's very important, and sometimes with the spreadsheets you lack those types of functionality to really be able to track what has changed in the database. Not just what has changed, but when the changes were made, who made the changes, what the value was before the changes, what the value is after the change. So to be able to have that in-depth trail, that logging of the changes as the process flows through. Okay, just some different ideas to think about. Who implements? That will be key when you're talking to a vendor to understand and have a clear vision of the implementation process and who's going to really be responsible for the implementation. Okay, so you want to know what is your vendor's implementation and their training philosophy. That's important. And keep in mind, vendor selection is really just as important as your product selection. Your vendor is going to be your partner, and they're going to be a very important source of reliance for you. So in addition to the right solution, you want to partner up with the right vendor. Very important. In PowerPlan's case, our philosophy is always a train the trainer approach, and we offer different methods of training, but we find face-to-face tends to work best. We enjoy sitting down with the customer, spending face-to-face and doing an in-depth knowledge transfer and taking a train-the-trainer approach. That's what we do at PowerPlan. And the other thing that you will want to ask vendors is who performs the implementation. Are they employees of the vendor or are they subcontractors? And again, it's just important to have that information. It may or may not be a deciding factor in your decision, but it is information that you should know. And in our case, every engagement, and regardless of how the sale was made, if it was a direct sale or if it was made through one of our partners, PowerPlan employees are responsible for customer implementations. So we never subcontract that piece of that critical piece of the project out. Okay, it's important to understand when you're thinking of implementations what you as the vendor, or excuse me, you as the customer are responsible versus what are the responsibilities of the vendor. And in order to ensure that the appropriate resources on your end will be available, That is why kind of a clear understanding of what's considered joint responsibilities versus what areas can you anticipate, what type of tasks can you expect that you will be held responsible for as part of the success of the project. And in our case, again, we very much look at the entire implementation as a joint project. It is in our opinion, I mean, it's teamwork, it's collaborative, and together we achieve a successful outcome. Okay, when the type of resources, that's another question you'll want to ask the potential vendors. What type of vendor resources, what experience do they have, those that will be assigned to your project? What type of roles do they hold? Okay, so will you have, for instance, a dedicated team? Will you have a assigned and dedicated, easily accessible project manager, lead functional resource? What are those types of roles that you can expect? How long is the transition? A very common question for any engagement, and this is important, and it's very important for you to understand that timeline and for you to ask that question and get the answers that you need. As far as what to expect, what is an average implementation timeline? Well, obviously there are certain factors that weigh in when saying what an average implementation timeline is. But I can speak from experience in giving you some stats on our side at PowerPlan. To give you an idea, for let's say a small to mid-size nonprofit organization, the implementation cycle is roughly 2 weeks, maybe 2 to 3 weeks. Public sector implementations tend to be a little longer. They tend to involve more users and varying types of user roles, and an average timeline for a public sector implementation is generally a 6 to 8 week time span. And when we give those timelines, I'm not suggesting that that is a full-time somebody working non-stop, but that's the span of the timeline with the project plan in place and tasks and dependencies identified, that the type of timeline that you can anticipate. Again, we talked about knowing who is responsible for what, and that's where having a project plan and a proposed schedule and kind of knowing what those resource usages, the expected resource usages, come into play. Okay, as far as, you know, understanding where can the process break down. In that case, any lack of communication. Where I have seen, in most cases, I believe that the processes and our timelines have been satisfied, have gone smoothly. Where I have seen breakdown is when there are key project resource issues, unavailability at critical project points in time. So I think it's important for you as the customer to work with the vendor to be flexible and to develop a project schedule and a timeline that really works for both of you as a team. And then obviously, I mean, if the unforeseen comes up, that something that's you know, inevitable and can't really be foreseen, then that's an exception. But other than that, once you have an agreed upon schedule, you want to make sure that both the vendor and you are committed to those key tasks and those key timelines, so that if trips, for instance, are planned, that key project resources are available and are participating as expected based on their roles. Okay, and then, you know, when there's an unexpected change in project scope, it happens, but how flexible is your selected vendor to changes in project scope. Those are things you want to openly discuss. You want to discuss the changes and if that should occur. What is the potential impact? What is the impact on the overall project, on the timeline? Are there cost impacts? So those are types of questions that you want to ask. Okay, and then what assurance do you have that the vendor that you select is really truly going to adhere to the agreed upon schedule? And for that, I would suggest get a commitment up front from your vendor, and you also, as the customer, understanding that this engagement is really a collaborative teamwork. You want to be as committed to the project goals and timelines really as you expect your vendor to be, because it really truly is teamwork. Okay, training and implementation. This is important, and really only you know what methodology works best for you and what type of environment is needed in order for you to get the most effective training and for you to learn in the best possible way. So you want to make sure that the vendor that you select is flexible with the different training and implementation delivery options that they present. Okay, you want to know what type of options, do they offer face-to-face implementation and training? Are there remote offers? Is there some maybe that's a hybrid where there's certain work that's being done remotely but at critical points in the project that those are done in a joint fashion, working together face to face? So again, think about what is the most ideal for ensuring that you are going to be satisfied that you have received an adequate knowledge transfer of your newly selected solution. Okay, and also obviously cost effectiveness plays into factor. So if budget and cost is very high on your list, you want to talk to your vendor about what approach do they recommend, but also have them consider from a cost standpoint what is going to be the most cost effective for you and what they recommend and what they have seen work best. Okay, and again, approach, it needs to work for you and it needs to work for them. And your objective should be to be trained well enough so that it minimizes your dependence or your reliance on the vendor. And really you want to be pretty self-substantial with your new solution going forward, knowing of course you're going to need some customer support, but you don't want to heavily rely on the vendor for everything that you need. Training for new hires down the road. So we know that at the onset of a new project, you're going to receive the implementation services and that initial training. But this is an important question and something for you to think about and question your vendors on up front. How do they address the issue of new hires or reorganizations whereby you have new users involved in the system or a change in administrative staff? Those are real practical cases, and what type of options do the vendors offer for you? Because every vendor that you talk to, every vendor will offer consulting services. That's never an issue. But generally those consulting services will come at a pretty heavy cost. Okay, so our recommendation to you would be really seek up front any type of bundled or discounted services in anticipation that you will have these type of future needs. In PowerPlan's case, we give an offering during the procurement process. We have something that's called refresher services, and those refresher services come at a pretty significantly discounted consulting rate, and they're pre-purchased, but they were specifically, that package, that offering was put into place knowing, kind of foreseeing that this is a real business issue. Maybe a year down the line it It could be that you're starting a new budget cycle. It could be that there are new people involved in key processes, but inevitably there will be some need for some future refreshing or training. And so again, PowerPlan offers refresher services up front, but I would encourage you, any vendor that you're talking to, just see what their offerings are, okay? And think about, for new hires and new training down the road, how do they deliver that training? Is that face-to-face? Is that remote? Is it a combination thereof? What is their training approach for that future training? Are they going to utilize your data so that it's a very relatable experience, or is it more of a boilerplate type of training? It's important to understand that, okay? And what the vendor, find out what the vendor's experience and what do they recommend. What is included in maintenance? So if you have, first of all, an on-premise solution, because I believe earlier on I mentioned in one of the slides, one factor to consider is what deployment option, software deployment method works best for your organization. An on-premise, where the database is housed at on-site locally at your facility and you're in control of that, or if you have significant constraints in your IT area, is it more beneficial for you to be seeking a vendor-hosted solution where really the IT responsibilities fall on the vendor? In either case, I mean, there's going to be cost differences, different types of support services depending on which deployment option. But if you select an on-premise solution, it's important to understand that what you're probably expect to pay is just a rough average from any vendor is going to be an annual fee of about 22 to 25% of your software licensing cost. And then what you can expect in turn for that annual fee is that you should be entitled to receive any and all software upgrades. Those upgrades, regardless of whether they're a major release or a minor release, you should receive any upgrades. You should have access to your technical or IT support as it relates to the solution. Okay, so any type of, for instance, if IT wanted to create a test environment with using a copy of your production database or something like that, that would be considered technical support of your product, and that should be considered included coverage as part of your maintenance contract. Functional support. Functional support typically is limited to, it's contained to, like, for instance, the key administrative type users or the budget staff, so that if you have, for instance, 100 users of the system that you select within your organization, you obviously do not have 100 users contacting the vendor, but you have certain administrative type users who, again, those are the users who really get that in-depth knowledge transfer and get the train the trainer type of learning experience, so that they in turn can be their first level of support to their end users. And then if there's an issue or question that they're unable to address for their users, then they contact the vendor. But that type of support is included or should be included in your maintenance. And of course, you want to make sure that any vendor that you have, you are paying this fee, you want to make sure that you have an easy access when support services are needed. The customer experience, that's important, because your customer experience needs to be a positive one, okay? And we really believe that the customer relationships that we have, they begin with our very first point of contact, and they continue that relationship continues indefinitely, okay? But it is key to understand who's going to provide your customer support services. Is it a call center, or are they employees of the product or the vendor? And if so, what level of experience do those to those individuals who are your first level of support, what level of experience do they have with the product? In PowerPlan's case, all calls and or emails, any way that a support request comes in to us, those issues are taken by business analysts, implementers, senior implementers, project managers. You can be assured that the level of experience of the person taking your support call is very knowledgeable of the product, has the domain expertise, and that what that gives you is peace of mind for a very high first call resolution rate. Okay, that being said, you'll want to know what happens if the user taking your support call or assisting you is unable to resolve your issue. What is the vendor's escalation path for ongoing issues? Okay. Again, in PowerPlan's case, a very high first call resolution rate because of the experienced personnel that take those support calls. But if that issue for any reason needs to be escalated to a higher level within the organization, the individual that took that initial call is still responsible for ongoing communication and keeping the customer updated on the status of those issues. And our philosophy at PowerPlan really has always been, we don't just say this, we truly believe it, to treat our customers as though our world revolves around them, because we really some key takeaways that I'd kind of like to leave you with today. But again, it is important as you start down the path of looking for a better budgeting and forecasting solution to do your homework, do your internal homework, be clear as to what functionality, what features are truly needed within your organization. Distinguish what's really needed, what's nice to have, and prioritize them. That will really allow you to spend sufficient time getting the answers to those items that to you when you're discussing your needs with vendors. And challenge your vendors. Don't go easy, challenge them. But at the same time, use that example that I went with, that RFP that had 500, nearly 500 functional and technical questions. If you require all the vendors to jump over significant hurdles, and sometimes what you risk and what you forego is the responses to the true areas that are key to you, and you also may alienate some potential good vendors who really take one look at this list of requirements and say, just kind of unreasonable. We appreciate having the opportunity presented, but we're going to pass on it because we have other ones that are more feasible to work on. So I would just caution you that while you certainly need to challenge your vendors, you also need to be reasonable in the expectations and really hone in on what is important when you're looking for a solution. And lastly, make sure that you're selecting a partner. You're not just selecting a vendor, you are selecting a partner, okay, that you're going to trust and that's going to be there for the long haul with you. Okay, you should be able to have a peace of mind, a sense of comfort that you trust your vendor, that they are truly a partner, that you can go to them for best practices, for recommendations, and that it's a mutually beneficial partnership between you and your vendor solution. And lastly, I mentioned that at the end of this webinar that we would make an offer from PowerPlan available to you. Again, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank all of you that have joined in and listened to the presentation today, and let you know that this offer stands available to you. If you are thinking of moving towards a better budgeting and forecasting, which if you've participated today, hopefully you are, and if you're wondering if you could potentially be a good candidate for PowerPlan's integrated budgeting solution, you can request at no charge our budget process grader. It is a brief questionnaire, and based on your responses to that questionnaire, we ask a few key questions. It allows us to kind of assess what you're doing and benchmark you kind of against other comparable type organizations and what they're doing, and we will share that assessment with you and give you suggestions on where we believe that the solution could add value, which processes perhaps could be streamlined, maybe cutting steps out. So that budget process grader, we're offering that free of charge if anyone on the call is interested in that. We also offer private demonstrations of the PowerPlan solution, and that in an environment, in a webinar type environment where you have lots of different people with different needs, it really allows us to demo specifically to you and to your team, and allows it to be a very interactive session, allow you to ask us the tough questions, put us to the test to show you what we say we can do to demonstrate that, and make sure that you see a potential fit. Okay, and I leave you with this final thought, is that obviously we're approaching here in the next couple days quarter 4, and the new year coming up faster than we realize, and this may be an opportunity to and the right timing to just see if we can help, and whether it's generating a year-end estimate or planning for your upcoming budget cycle. But in any case, if you think that there's a potential for PowerPlan to be of service to you, we would love the opportunity, and our experts stand by for you. And with that, I conclude this webinar, and I'm going to turn this back over to Anne-Marie at this time.
Okay, you don't have to make me the presenter, just leave this slide up. I did want to let the group know that if you're interested in the budget process grader, which is going to be really helpful information no matter where you decide to go, just email us at info@powerplancorp.com. So I'll spell that out for you, info@powerplancorp.com. Or you can just go to our website and use the contact us form and just say I was at your webinar. There's a variety of ways to get in touch with us, and just let us know that you're interested in the budget process grader. I'm not seeing any questions on chat just now, so Tina, it sounds like you were very thorough and, and covered off on everything that people were wondering about, but I also noticed that nobody's gotten off the line yet, so if you have any questions, now's the time to chat them to me. You know, Tina, there was one thing that you were saying too about when you guys stopped to think about the future of your organization. I do think it's also interesting to talk to your IT budget to find out, do they have plans for infrastructure? Are they looking to move to the cloud? Sometimes you end up doing this research yourself because you'll be the end user. You're the one with the budgeting and forecasting experience, but your IT department might have some strategic long-range plans, and get that information, have that, you know, in your pocket when you're doing your searches as well, to know what, you know, if we move our infrastructure to the cloud, what does that mean? It could be another really good indicator of the solution you choose.
Absolutely, good input.
Thanks. All right, well, I don't see any questions, so I think we can let everybody have their day back, and thanks so much for joining us. And we're going to be hosting more and more webinars, so please, you know, watch our websites and follow us on Facebook, and so that you'll know about our other webinars when they become available. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.